Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to add new devices to Player Electricity System. So to get started we're going to go to the Blueprints folder, then to Devices, and in here is where all our existing devices are. Now there's a couple of ways that we can create a new device. If you're creating a device that's similar to an existing one, you could right click it, duplicate that blueprint, and then you could go about editing that new duplicated blueprint, changing its mesh or power settings. But in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create a new device from scratch. So we're going to scroll down and find the BP Master Power device, right click that and create a child blueprint class. Then we're going to call it BP underscore new device. You can call yours whatever you like, and we'll open that blueprint up. Now to start with, we're going to need a mesh for our device. So we're just going to click add and search for static mesh and add that in. And we'll compile quickly. And now we can set a mesh. For this, I'm just going to use a 1 meter cube, but you would use your device's mesh. So I'm just going to add that in. And I'm going to move mine up a little bit so it's closer to the ground here. Then we'll compile. Next, we're going to need to add in the build collision. So to do that, we're going to go to add and we're going to search for box. And we're going to add a box collision component. Then with that selected, over in the details panel, we want to find the collision presets and double check that that is set to overlap all dynamic, like that. And now we're going to change the size of this box just so it covers our device. And this collision is going to be used when we're actually placing the device to detect if anything's overlapping our new device. And if it is, then it will block the placement. So I'm just going to change the scaling settings here so I can make it a bit more precise. And I'm going to get this fairly close to our device, like that. I do recommend leaving a small gap at the bottom, and this will allow the landscape to not interfere with the placement of your device. So a gap similar to this, you could probably make it a little bit smaller. And now when we place this device, if anything else is overlapping this box, then the placement won't be allowed. But we do need to add a tag to this device, so we're just going to search for tag in the detail settings, add a new component tag, and we're going to call this collision, like that. Now, if you've got a device that has a different shape, you can actually add multiple boxes if you like. You can just duplicate the existing one or create a new one by clicking add. And as long as that box also has the collision tag and its collision settings are set to overlap all dynamic, that will also be used as part of our placement collision. Next, we need to add in our cable sockets. So we'll go to the add option here and search for connection. And we're going to add a cable connection point component. And that will add in a new component here. I'm just going to move mine to, say, this side of the device like that. And I'll move it a little bit to the side. Then we're going to clear this search. And over here, we need to set some of the settings. So we need to set whether or not this is an input or an output socket. So I'm going to set this one as an input socket. Then for the UI here, we set the name that the socket has. And this is the name that displays when our character actually looks at this socket with the cable tool. So I'm just going to rename this to input, like that. Now, depending on the device that you're making, you may want to add an output socket. You may not want to add an output socket. That's completely up to you. But for this example, I am going to add an output socket. So I'm actually just going to duplicate our existing one here. So we'll just right click, do duplicate. That adds in a new one for us. We'll just move this along here. And then with it selected, I'm going to change it to an output socket. I'm going to change the display name to output as well, like that. Then we'll compile. Next, we need to add a ground check component. Now, what this component does is basically just do a trace and it detects if this device is actually being placed on a surface. And if it's not, say the player's aiming up in the air, then the placement won't be allowed. Now, if you want your device to be able to be placed anywhere in the air, just floating, you wouldn't add a ground check component, but I want my device to actually be placed on a surface. So we're going to add one of those in. So we'll just search for ground and we'll add a ground detect component, like that. Now we want to put this near the bottom of the mesh, so I'm just going to move mine down here. And I'm going to move it a little bit up, like that. And then we'll move it up a bit more because it's going to do a trace downwards and that will hit a surface, or if it hits the surface, we'll be allowed to place it. Then over here in the settings, we can set the ground trace distance. So 20 is a little bit high, so I'm going to turn mine down to about 5. That just basically means that the ground check component will trace 5 centimeters down, and if it hits the surface, then it will allow placement of our device. So I'll compile that now. Next, we can set the health settings for our device. So if I select the health component over here, you can see that we've got some health settings here. You can enable or disable whether or not the device uses health. You can set a max health, and you can also set a starting health. For my device, I'm just going to leave this all as the default values. Next, we're going to add our power component to our device. So we're going to go up to add, and we're going to search for master space power. Sometimes you have to add a space in for the search to find it. So we'll click that. Now we've got our power component, and we'll compile. So with our power component selected, we can go over to the details. I'm just going to hide these other tabs so we can see what we're doing. We've got the power settings here, and this is where we set how our device actually behaves. So we can set whether or not it requires power to be turned on and off. So I'm going to set mine to say require 5 power to run. Then we've got things like generated power and battery power, and the UI settings, and whether or not the device can be switched on. When the device is switched off, it blocks power going out of its output sockets, and also whether or not the device starts switched on. If you want to know more about these settings, there's guides in the documentation that go through in detail what each of these settings do. But for now, I'm just going to leave mine with a required power of 5. We can also set our device's name here as well. So I'm just going to call mine new device, like that. And you can also set an icon here if you like, and this is the icon that shows up when you look at device on the power info panel, so you can set the icon here as well. Next, I'm going to be adding a light component to my device, and this is just so we have something to turn on and off when the device actually receives power. This is up to you depending on the device you're making. You might not want to add this, you might have some other plan for your device, but for me, I'm just going to add in a light. We're going to use a point light. I'm just going to move this up to the top of the device so we can see when it's on or off, like that. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn its visibility to false. And this is just so that when our device is placed, the light won't be on instantly. It will need to receive power before the light actually turns itself on. Next, we're going to go to the event graph and set up our code that decides what our device does when it actually has its required power, or if it doesn't have its required power. So we'll head to the event graph. We're going to create a new event. We're going to search for PES has required power, and we're going to select the top one here. Now this event will run whenever the device does or doesn't have its required power. So we'll drag out from here, and this pin here will return true or false if the device has its required power. So for my device, I'm just going to have the light turn on and off depending on if it has the required power. But with your device, you may want it to do something else when it receives its required power or doesn't. So this is where you would add that code in. So I'm just going to grab my point light here. I'm going to drag out from that. I'm going to do set visibility, and I'm going to plug that into true. And if the device does have the required power, I'm going to set the visibility to true. And I'm just going to copy and paste this, add this to false, and connect our point light up to target. And then I'm going to untick this. So when our device does not have its required power, it turns the light off. So now we've set up the basics for our device, we're going to go to the device list. So I'm just going to drag this up to the top here, compile and save it. Then we're going to go to the blueprints folder, and we're going to find the device list and open that up. Now we're going to add a new device into here. Again, like the blueprints, you could just duplicate an existing device in here by clicking the duplicate option. That means you won't have to fill all of this out from scratch. But for me, I'm just going to click the add button and create a whole new row. Then I'm going to name mine. You want to name this your device name. I'm just going to call mine new device, like that. Then we can set a name. So I'm just going to call mine again new device. You can set a description if you like. We need to set the actor, so this will be the new blueprint we created. So for me, that's the BP new device here. Then we're going to set placement type, and we're going to set this to standard. Then we've got a few settings here for whether or not we ignore floor collision, allow rotation. I'm going to enable allow rotation. I'm going to set the rotation increments to say 45 degrees. Next, we've got a few settings here for rotation. So we've got use surface rotation and use player rotation. Use surface rotation means that the device, say we were looking at a wall, for example, the device would rotate to face the direction of the wall. Whereas use player rotation means that the device will always try and face the same direction as the player. You can enable both of these, and the device will try to combine both those rotations. For this device, I'm just going to tick on the use player rotation. Then we've got placement limits. This just limits the angle of the surface that the device can be placed on. So for example, you could take a look at the generator. You can see that it can be placed on a 45-degree angle. For me, I'm just going to leave this disabled. Next, we've got the cost. This is where we set what resources it costs to place a device. So we can click the add button here and we can open this up and we can set a resource. So I could set this to say metal and I want it to require 100 metal. You could also add an additional resource. You can just click the add element. You can add as many resource costs as you like to this device. Then we've got our icon here, and this is the icon that's actually used inside the build menu. And then we've also got the non-hit surface rotation offset. So this is used if the device isn't actually being placed against any surface. You can add a rotation offset to it. So I'm just going to set my icon to say this green face icon. You can set it to whatever you like. Then we're going to save this. We're going to go back to our new device, then go to class defaults. We'll get rid of this search. We want to find the device settings. Then we want to go to the device data table row, open that up. We're just going to set the row name to the row that we just created. So I'm going to find the new device and select that there, then compile and save that. Now we can test out our new device. So I'm just going to go to the showcase, hit play, and we'll press tab to open the build menu. If we scroll down, you should see your new device here. So if I click that, we've got our preview. You can see our ground trace is working as well. So I can't place it up in the air, but I can place it against a surface. So I'm going to place that down. You can see that we've got our required power and health showing up. And our light is disabled right now because it doesn't have its required power. If I grab a wind turbine here, just place that down and connect this up with the cable and connect that to the input, you can see our light is now lit up. We've got our required power. And if I destroy our wind turbine here, you can see the cable disconnects. Our device no longer has its required power and the light has disabled. Now, right now, we can't actually interact with this new device. If I interact with it, the light won't turn on and off, but I'll show you how to set that up in a moment. Next, we need to set up a destruction mesh for our device. So if it gets destroyed, then we want it to play its destruction mesh. So for me, because I'm using the cube, I'm just going to go to the meshes, I believe it's in demo, then meshes, static, and I've got the cube here. You need to find your mesh, and then you just want to drag it into the level like that. Then go to the select mode, and we want to find the fracture option here. We're going to click new, and we're going to navigate to the meshes, then geometry collection here, and do create geometry collection. So now we've created a new destruction mesh for our cube here. I'm just going to set this to use a uniform fracture. You can spend a lot more time messing about with this and getting a precise destruction mesh, but I'm just setting this up quickly. So we're just going to select uniform, then fracture, and then we're done. We can do save all, and that will save our new destruction mesh. Now we want to go back to our new device here. Then in functions, we're going to search for add, and we want to override the add destruction mesh function here, like that. Now in here is where we add our destruction mesh when our device actually gets destroyed. So first I'm just going to delete this parent node. Now the easiest way to set this up is to just go to one of the existing devices. So for example, if I go to blueprints, devices, I open up the combiner for example, and we'll go to the add destruction mesh in here. If it's not up here, you can just search for it and open that up. We're just going to copy these two nodes and go to our new device and paste them in. And we just do this because that way this node already has all its settings correct. Then we can just connect this up to here and then select the node. And here we can set the rest collection. So we're going to set this to the new one we just created. So I'm just going to search for cube. You can see our cube shows up there. Then we can compile and save this. Now, one other thing that I'm going to add for my device is that when the device gets destroyed, I want my light to actually turn off because we don't want the destroyed mesh to play and then the light still be on. So I'm just going to grab my point light here and I'm just going to tell this to set visibility. And I'm going to leave the visibility unticked like that. So now when our mesh destroys, our light should turn off. Then we'll compile and save this and we can actually test it out. I'm just going to delete this now. We don't, if we go to select, we can delete this box because we don't need that anymore. We can hit play. I'll create my new device. I'll connect it up with a wind turbine quickly. Plug that in here. So our light is on. If I press 1, that will apply damage. You can see the health goes down. When it hits 0, it plays its destruction mesh and our light turns off as well. Now in that example, my destruction mesh kind of exploded a bit. You could spend a little bit more time tweaking your mesh in the fracture options that we use to actually create the destruction mesh. You can also come into the new device again, select this node, and there's some various things for like clustering and general settings here that you can play about with to tweak the behavior of your destruction mesh. There are also some other settings that you can change for your device. If we go to class defaults, in here you can see under the device settings, we've got settings for repairing, picking up, destruction, ownership, placement, and sockets. In the documentation, there are guides that cover all of these settings in detail. So if you want to find out more about those, you can take a look. But in general, we've got the repair settings. So if the device can be repaired and how much it costs, whether or not the device can be picked up, and the resources that will be received when the player picks it up. You can set how long the destruction mesh lasts. You can set whether or not the device can have more than one owner. You've got a placement sound, and then over here you've got some socket settings, and there is a separate guide on sockets that goes into a lot more detail on how to use those. Next, we're going to set up interaction for our device so our player can turn it on and off. So to start with, we'll go to master power component, and we want to make sure under the switch category, can be switched off is ticked on. Then we'll go to the functions here, go to override and search for pairs interact, and open that up. And in here, this is the code that will be run whenever our player interacts with this device. So we're going to grab our master power component, drag out from that and search for set switched on. We want the node up here. Connect this up to here, like that. Then we want to get our current switched on state, so we'll do get switched on. And whatever this value is, we just want to flip it. So we'll search for not boolean. And this means that whenever we interact with our device, it will just flip between on and off. So now we're telling the power component to turn on and off, but we need to tell our light in our device to turn on and off when that happens. So to do that, we go to the event graph. We create a new event called pairs switched on. We want this top one here. Now this will run whenever the device is switched on or switched off. So we're going to drag out from here and do an if. And I'm going to copy these nodes from down here because these are the nodes that turn our light on and off. And we'll connect these up to here, like that. Now one thing we do want to check is, does the device have its required power when we tell it to switch on? Because the player could switch on a device that doesn't have its required power. So to do that, we just have to get the master power component, drag out from here and do get required, and we want get has required power, and we're going to plug that into here like that, so that when our device is switched on, it checks, does it have the required power? If it does, then our light will be visible. If it doesn't, our light will stay hidden. Then down here, we need to check, is the device on when we receive the required power? So we'll do a similar thing. We'll copy paste this node, drag out and do get switched on. And then in here, we just want to plug this up to our top node like that. This will check when our device has its required power, is the device switched on? If it is, the light will be visible. If it's not switched on, our light won't be visible. So we can compile and save this now. And we're ready to test this out. So we'll go to the showcase, hit play, and I will place our new device. Then I'll get a wind turbine to power it. We'll connect that up to here, like that. You can see our device is currently on, so the light has gone on. If I interact with it, it turns off. If I turn it back on, it's on. If I destroy our wind turbine here, you see, even though the device is on, it doesn't have its required power, so our light has turned off. We can also check that the power is traveling through our device, so we'll connect this back up. You see our light has come back on, and then we can say connect another light, and we'll connect this to the output from our new device to our light, like that. You can see that power is going through our new device as well. Now finally, you may want it so that when you interact with your device and it turns off, it also turns off any devices connected to it. Currently ours doesn't, the power just goes through it. But to do that, what you'd need to do is go to your new device, select master power component, and over in the switch category, you just want to turn on block output power when off. If this is on, when our device is off, no devices connected to its output will be powered from it. So that's pretty much it for this video. Your device should be set up and working now. If you want to see some examples of different ways that you can set up the switched on and has required power events, I recommend taking a look at some of the included devices like the pressure plate or the trap here. You can see different ways of turning on and off the device using your own code. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below.